Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all keeping safe and well. My name is Michael Burns, and I'm the President and CEO of the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation. I'm glad to see so many of you have tuned in for the second webinar of our STEM during the session on Slido. We'll have time at the end to answer those questions. Before I introduce our speakers today, what I would like to do is, on behalf of the foundation, is to thank you for your continued support of the Princess Margaret. Thanks to you and the incredible work of these leading scientists and clinicians, we are continuing to make great strides in our mission to conquer cancer in our lifetime. Today's session, Big Data, Advancing More Responsive Patient Care, features two experts in their field, Dr. Benjamin Haibe-Kains and Dr. Thomas Purdy. Dr. Haibe-Kains is a senior scientist and scientific lead of the data science program at the Princess Margaret Cancer Center, an assistant professor in the medical biophysics and computer science departments of the University of Toronto. He currently runs the bioinformatics and computational genomics laboratory at Princess Margaret. He and his team are using large data sets to develop predictive models of therapy response and survival. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much, Michael. Glad to be here.
Our second expert is Dr. Thomas Purdy. Dr. Purdy was awarded a PhD in medical biophysics at the University of Western Ontario before completing a medical physics program at the Princess Margaret. His research seeks to develop automated methods for radiation treatment planning and to use machine learning to improve quality assurance processes for radiotherapy. Welcome, Tom. To both Ben and Tom, it's great to have you here. Before we jump into the questions that we have for you, I'd love to get an idea how you and your families are doing during COVID-19. Ben?
I mean, it's obviously a very complicated time, very challenging times for everybody. I think the most notable moment is when during recess and so on. And it's hard to tell her that I don't know when it's going to happen. And we all hope that in September, they will be able to go back to school in good conditions. So that's the challenge we have right now. They're happy with their parents, but they're very, very eager to go back to school and see their friends.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, as we discussed, my oldest daughter is in grade 8, so she's missing out on a lot of highlights of her, elementary school, her working at home or doing school at home. We've lost that connection with our friends and family. So that's been a struggle. But when we talk about people are embracing technology a little bit more, so that's why what we're talking about today is a little bit poignant as well.
No question, and thank you both for sharing those experiences with us. Ben, maybe I'll start with you. Everyone has their own understanding of data science and how they interpret it from the lens of their work or industry. Can you help us understand?
So that's a very good question. We already heard the word AI, data science, and machine learning, and it could be quite confusing. So my analogy to explain at least my definition of what data science is data science is a very big computer-based toolbox. All the tools are based on computers. They're based on cutting-edge computer hardware. They're based on computer software. They're based on algorithms. So this is really this massive toolbox that we have that I call data science. And Tom will talk a little bit later what is machine learning and AI. I consider them tools in that data science toolbox. So what data scientists try to do is to extract new insights from very large and complex data. Sometimes those data are very structured, sometimes those data are very unstructured. And we use those insights to develop new ways to monitor, diagnose, and predict evolution of cancer. And that's the role of data science in cancer care.
Excellent. Tom, artificial intelligence is a hot topic in mainstream media. What is AI and how can it be utilized in a healthcare setting? What are some of the possibilities that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, AI covers a lot of ground, and as Ben was talking about, when we talk about AI, we're talking about trying to make predictions or infer new knowledge. And so at the end of the day, we're trying to build these systems that learn. And so it's really exciting. And anyone who has a device connected to the internet, my dad, we just got him an iPad. So whether or not he knows it, but he's even using AI just when he uses that device. And so when you ask like Siri or Alexa about the weather, or you get a recommendation for a movie to watch on Netflix, or even when you're shopping, say on Amazon, and you see those suggestions, those are all based on AI. So they're providing you recommendations. And so the really cool part is that the more we use it, the better the system gets. But at the same time, it's also tailored to us. So it becomes more specific. And so that's what the promise of AI is, I think. And, in healthcare, we have so much data, and, Ben will talk about this a little bit more, but, we can't really make sense of it. And so what we want to do is ask compelling questions, these complicated questions, and AI can hopefully solve them. So, for healthcare, I think the possibilities of AI are endless. Like whether we talk about diagnosing disease based on patient symptoms or discover new drugs or the most appropriate drug for a patient. My work has mostly been focused on improving treatments and optimizing treatments to reduce, say, side effects for patients. And so I think for healthcare, employing AI is very exciting. And I think, ultimately we're going to make things better for patients using it.
Excellent. Now, Tom, this is a serious question. What would you say to the naysayers who don't believe that AI will be a useful tool, who, when they hear the term artificial intelligence, have visions of robot overlords from science fiction novels and from Hollywood movies?
It's a great question, and no joke, almost every talk I give on AI has a slide of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, and this concept of the self-aware, autonomous robots. But what I'm trying to point out is that we're nowhere close to that, but at the same time, it does give us an idea or the concept of what the potential of AI is. And so, we might not want to go there, but we do have some really good examples of AI in front of us, which they're not autonomous robots, but self-driving cars is a really good example where we have these systems that people are building where and they're complicated because they need to interact with humans. So we're putting these AI systems in an environment which is chiefly driven by humans. So they need to interact with humans in their environment. And so this is a challenge, and this is very complicated. Like Ben and we have these very nice closed systems that we build ourselves. So we collect the data we want, we ask the questions we want, and then we have a pretty good idea of the results that are coming out just because we're asking the questions. But with that, you can see people making these great strides are going to be great for healthcare in general, just because everyone's trying to push the envelope. And we might not get to the self-aware robot anytime soon, but at least when people are trying to build that, they're going to build stuff that are going to be usable for people in healthcare too.
Excellent. Ben, I want to come back to you. Perhaps you can expand and elaborate about some of the ways that Princess Margaret is currently using data science.
So, as you said, I'm the scientific lead of the data science program, and it's a big team, including many people, such as Dr. Trent Ron, Alejandro Berlin, and Luke Brozowski. So we are trying to use data science for the benefit of the patient within Princess Margaret. So the way we do that first is to try to collect and integrate as much data as possible. And the amount of data generated during the patient journey at Princess Margaret is staggering. But they also stored in different systems that we need to connect together. And because AI and data science in general is pretty data hungry, we really need to collect as much of those data as possible to basically build up predictive models that would help kind of improve cancer care. So one of the concrete examples that we're doing, we are developing web portals to allow doctors and scientists to better access data that are being generated both at the clinical and research side. One example is the biospecimen portal, where we are trying to link the very rich repository of tumor biospecimens that we collect in the clinical side to make them available for research, and better understand where those samples come from, what are the characteristics of the patient, so we can basically do better research. We also have a series of what we call catalyst projects. Those are proof of concept that have been proposed by the Princess Margaret Cancer Center community as very hot question, but also very hard question to answer. So we are trying to collect those data for to support those projects. And that's how we use data science in general. And actually, AI is only a small part of how those data are being used for research.
That's a great overview. Can we sort of maybe pick up on that last point you made, and can you provide us with a view on the connection between data science and AI and how they relate to each other?
So we basically have autonomous killer robots doing all the science in our labs right now. We don't really do anything anymore. Joke apart, I think what Tom was referring to about the lack of fully autonomous AI algorithm that will take over the world, what we do is what we call narrow artificial intelligence. So we, as Tom said, we have very specific tasks that we want to, or gaps that we want to address, very specific questions. We are very far away from building algorithms that can do multiple tasks in an efficient way and even transfer the learning from one task to another. That's kind of the dream for, we call it general artificial intelligence. What we do is more narrow artificial intelligence, which is pretty much harmless when it comes to killer robots. So the way the relationship between data science and AI is basically, AI is very data hungry. So data science needs to collect high quality, very large data set to feed those AI algorithms. But data science can also allow us to discover new data types, new data streams that can feed the AI algorithm, and maybe also other tasks. Even so, we're not good at building AI that can do everything. Having multiple phenotypes for the patient will definitely help building better AI models. So you can imagine that predicting drug response, for instance, is very important in isolation, but if you can also predict patient survival, then you may inject knowledge of the tumor evolution in the model that will ultimately be better at predicting drug response. So having multiple tasks for AI algorithm is actually helping training better models, and that's what data science can do. So they're very much interconnected, and you basically need data science and AI to work together to really make those models the best possible.
Outstanding. Ben, let's get back to you. I understand that data science is becoming an integral part of clinical research, specifically clinical trials at Princess Margaret. Can you talk about the predictive drug response clinical trials your team is currently working on? In other words, how does the data science arm inform how you develop and deliver clinical trials at Princess Margaret?
That's kind of the holy grail for personalized medicine. We want to be able to predict which treatment should be given to each individual patients and the treatment they will mostly benefit from. We have a pretty large portfolio of anti-cancer treatments, but each tumor is very unique in its characteristics. So what we're trying to do in the lab is to find what we call biomarkers. Those are basically measurements about the tumor. It could be a gene mutation, it could be multiple copies, see how many copies of the genes are, or it could be imaging, how close is the tumor from the organ at risk. So there are many different data we can gather about the tumor. And hopefully those data can help predict which is the best treatment for the patient. The problem is we have very, very few of those biomarkers that are clinically approved. And the reason for that is you need a lot of data, so you need very large clinical trials, which obviously is not only very costly, but also very lengthy to organize. So we have a bit of an issue here where we cannot conceivably build large clinical trials for every single treatment we want to build a biomarker from. So my lab is basically, kind of shifting the question a little bit and try to see what kind of preclinical models we could use to discover a biomarker. And when I say preclinical models, I mean tumors we can grow in the lab. And suddenly it opens a lot of avenues for drug testing. You can actually take a single tumor, clone it in the lab. They could grow in a dish, they could grow in mouse models, and then treat them with the same drug. So we can actually generate a massive amount of data to better understand why some tumors are responsive to treatment X versus some other tumors that seem to be very resistant to treatment X. So we are analyzing those data using data science and AI approaches. And once we discover those new biomarkers or those new predictors of drug response, we are trying to bring them back to the clinicians. They're useless if they stay in the lab. They really need to be put at good use by the clinicians themselves. So what we are trying to do with, in collaboration with Dr. Trevor Pugh and the Cancer Genomics program led by Dr. Lilian Siu and Philippe Bedard, is to bring those new biomarkers that have been discovered in the lab so they can be used as one line of evidence during the tumor boards where we discuss the very unique characteristics of every individual tumor for patients involved in the Octane trial. So with that new system, we basically took biospecimens from the clinic, went back to the lab, tested those biospecimens with drugs, learned about their relationship between genomic aberrations and drug response, bring that information back to the clinician so they can discuss and use that new evidence, that new data stream to make better decisions. So it's only the beginning, but we really hope that this new data will help clinicians to make better decisions about treatment, more informed decisions about treatment, and we will track the performance over time to see whether that new system is actually increasing the response rate and improving cancer care in general.
Outstanding. Thanks, Ben. Tom, I understand you and your team have made great strides recently in utilizing AI. Can you describe how you've implemented AI in diagnostics and how AI has impacted the development of radiation treatment plans at Princess Margaret?
Yeah, I mean, we've been really excited about what we've been able to achieve with AI in the clinic and making radiation treatments better and faster for patients. And you know, as a little bit of background, this has taken a lot of time. Dr. Chris McIntosh, who's a computer scientist who had worked with me and is now a staff scientist at the University Health Network, we've been working on this technology since 2012, and you know, with Chris doing all the crazy complicated AI development. But you know, in order to make this work, we've also needed buy-in from the radiation medicine program here at Princess Margaret, which is great. You know, and that group includes oncologists, radiation oncologists, medical physicists, and radiation therapists. So, you know, in particular, Ali Berlin on oncology and Lee Conroy in medical physics have helped push this in the clinic and make this something that you know, we can actually use on patients. And so, you know, quickly, what we're basically doing is learning what a good radiation treatment looks like, and then using AI to consider all the factors of the patient's anatomy and how their tumors are treated and how their normal tissues are avoided, and having the AI automatically determine that. So it's really interesting. We have this automated approach, which basically leverages all the clinical expertise from Princess Margaret in order to make decisions about future patients. So, you know, we often use an twin analogy to describe how we do this, and that is, if we are making a treatment for a patient and we have an exact copy of that patient, well, there's no reason to say that that patient should get a different treatment. But we know clinically that doesn't happen. There's a lot of differences with experience, and you know, there's limited resources, so things might go a little bit faster. People might not have the same ideas as to what they're doing based on their clinical background. But with our system, those two patients would get the same treatment, which is really compelling, because it means that we're standardizing quality, we're having this uniform, consistent way of treating, which is leveraging not just one or two clinicians, but the whole team. So that's very powerful. And so I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, this becomes something that we can easily deploy as well. And so it makes it much more compelling, where I think patients in the future will know that they're getting the best treatments. And, you know, there is still human oversight, but at the same time, we're being able to make these treatments that were not possible before.
That's outstanding. Ben, back to you. I know before the session, you highlighted to me that data sharing is going to be crucial to the success of AI in global medicine. We certainly all know it's extremely important to share data widely to be able to reap the benefits of data science. What does this mean on a global level? And how are you working with the global community to ensure that this happens?
I think that's one of the key questions of nowadays science. We need to be more transparent. We need to share more, just because it's a very, very complex problem that requires a lot of data. As I said before, AI is very data hungry. So we need to gather as much data as possible. Now, even for big cancer centers like the Princess Margaret, a single institution is not usually able to gather enough data for complex questions such as, let's say, predicting drug response in cancer. However, collaborating internationally, connecting cancer centers together can really get us there and collect as much data as possible. So I'll give you two examples of where I think data sharing was really key to advance the field. So to come back to my previous example, I said I used a lot of data from those cancer models growing in laboratories. Actually, those data come from all over the world, from UK, from US, from Europe. And those data together allowed us to do things. A single data set is not enough to really answer those complex questions. And also more data means we can study more treatment. We can look at more different cancer types. So really, it would not have been possible if people were not sharing data publicly. Another great example I thought of data sharing in cancer research is the Project Genie from the American Association for Cancer Research. So they took on them to really bring multiple top cancer centers together to share the genomics data, the tumor-specific genomics data of patients onboarded in clinical trials. And Princess Margaret is actually a big contributor in the Project Genie. And together, we aggregated more than 80,000 data from more than 80,000 cancer patients. So that's really opening new avenues for applying complex AI algorithms to better understand what makes tumors more aggressive, what makes tumor more responsive to certain therapies. So without data sharing, those initiatives and those research projects would not have been possible. And I think we got to realize that for some rare cancer types, so for some very complex problems, we have to share more and more. We have to be more open about the data we collect and the research we do so we can really achieve this together. And Princess Margaret is really at the forefront of this. And we try to share data as much as possible when it's aligned to privacy and ethical policies of the institution.
Outstanding. Great to see how we're contributing not just locally and nationally, but globally as well. Tom, back to you for a moment. Obviously, an important component of data science and AI is the collection of data itself and patient participation. What are the benefits to patients of sharing their personal data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think Ben did a nice job of answering this already. So I'll just make a couple of quick points. But AI is data limited, as Ben said. So the more high quality data we have makes development and testing of AI algorithms better. It makes them more generalizable. What's also good is that with patient participation, especially with AI, I think they will know that their data will have a bigger impact than just on what their area is. So for example, even in radiation medicine, what we're developing could also help, say, the cardiac group or the diagnostic imaging group. And so I think what's really interesting is that we can leverage that data for multiple applications, which maybe we wouldn't have done before. So I think from that point of view, having patients participate in sharing their data might have more or has bigger impact now than maybe in the past. There's another interesting point here too with AI, which is a real benefit, and that is with AI, when we build these systems, or basically models of practice or whatever task we're trying to achieve, these are portable in the sense that we build a model and we can actually share them with other institutions. So this is really great because the data is just not trapped here at Princess Margaret, but could go to benefit other institutions, as Ben said. So this is a little bit of a different take on that. But by the same token, Princess Margaret could also benefit by having these models from other centers. So at the end of the day, this idea of patients sharing their data has much bigger impact overall than they might have in the past in a time when we weren't using AI. So I think that's really great. And ultimately, the more data we have, as I said, will benefit all facets of healthcare.
Excellent. Ben, I'm wondering what other kinds of information can be included in data sets to enable additional avenues of discovery. Obviously we can learn a lot about a disease and care from health-related data, but what are the advantages from your perspective of collecting supplementary data or other indicators? For example, socioeconomic backgrounds, postal codes, or even a number of languages spoken. Do you think that these data points would be helpful in a healthcare setting, or are they too fraught with human biases to ensure equity of care?
That's a great and actually very, very tricky question at the same time. So one of the promises of AI is to be able to, in data science, to be able to integrate multiple data sources to really kind of push the models to their limit, increase their accuracy, increase their clinical relevance. So there are many other data types we could collect that are not directly collected within the patient journey at the hospital. You mentioned socioeconomic backgrounds, postal code, and even number of languages. Some intuitively will not be relevant for a given question, but you can discover a lot of unexpected patterns if you have those data in hand. And some will be spurious correlation you could explain with factors that you may not measure, but some will just be truly true unexpected relationships. So in principle, more data we have, better it is. However, as soon as you collect new data and you don't always control how those data have been collected, then you may introduce new biases in your data set. And that's a very hot topic of research in AI and data science right now. It's how to detect those biases and how to make sure that our models are fair and ethical. As I said, a very, very hot area of research, but extremely important too. We are going to include more and more data in our models. Just to give you an example, we keep trying to predict patient survival based on data such as the images of the tumor or the genomic information about that tumor. However, you can imagine that whether a patient will survive 5 or 10 years will also depend on the physical exercise that that patient is doing, or the diet, or the family support, or, as you said, socio-economical factors. So all those data, are very important to predict the evolution of the disease, or actually the patient survival, which includes the evolution of the disease. So we will need to include all those factors, but we will have to be extremely careful each time we add a new data stream. We'll have to do our due diligence to make sure that the biases that will inevitably be in the data are can be accounted for, but also will lead to fair and ethical models.
Excellent. Let me stick with you, Ben, because a question about one of the tenets of personalized cancer medicine, or as some people like to call it, precision medicine, is that each person's personal genetic biomarkers could be used to better monitor, diagnose, and target the genetic defects driving their cancer. Is big data the next step in personalized cancer medicine? And if it is, what does it mean for the patient?
So obviously, big data seems the way to go, and mostly because we have this brand new computer hardware that are getting better and better every time. We're all waiting for the quantum computers, but before that, I'm sure there will be a few breakthroughs, more breakthroughs in the path of the usual computer as we use today. But our capacity to crunch data, analyze data is getting better and better every day. We are developing new algorithms to analyze those data, whether it's algorithm from data science or AI. So big data seems to be the way to go. However, this is only one path to personalized medicine. And that will involve, for the patient, it will involve collecting more data, maybe through wearables, such as Fitbit or Apple Watch, for instance, to see whether we can include things such as sleeping patterns or exercise as part of our models. However, I would say it's only one path to personalized medicine. We should never forget that pure, basic, serendipitous science is equally important. They really further our understanding of cancer, the fundamental process behind cancer evolution, and how the different biological entities interact to make a tumor more or less aggressive, more or less metastatic. So basic science will still be a very important tool to improve cancer care. Even so, sometimes they rely on smaller data, but they have very specific questions, and with the right design, they can really address those questions effectively. And it's not just basic science in the lab. You can think of psychosocial studies or research on palliative care. They will have huge impact on cancer research. Even so, they may not rely on big data. So I think big data will definitely be a very exciting path to personalized medicine, but I would like to emphasize that this is only one of many paths that will lead us there.
Great. I've got a question now for both Tom and Ben. I'll start with you, Tom. Now that some research has been expedited due to COVID-19, has your vision for the future of cancer care changed at all? And what do you think the patient experience could look like in 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We've always been moving forward with processes to make things efficient and more automatic. And I think with COVID-19, it's forced us to address this faster, which is great, or has been great. And now that we're here, it's very compelling to try to get patients on treatment faster or to get their tests done faster. And so, we've been learning a lot through COVID to change our processes, in particular, because, clinicians are not always in the building now, and people are working remote. And, with limitations, we need ways to get the same data and the same information, but in a different way. So it's really made us work or think outside the box, which is great. And, going back to AI, I think this is a really nice place where AI can operate, because we are always trying to develop systems where there's less human interaction between, say, clinicians and other different groups, so that we're in a position where we can make the transition to a remote patient care model easier, while at the same time not compromising any patient care. So in 5 years, I mean, Ben alluded to this point, I think we're going to have a bigger focus on remote monitoring of patients. And, a lot of us already have the technology that can do this. And again, too, this just feeds into more data that we're not doing a great job of collecting now, but with COVID has made us realize that, we need to do that. And so ultimately, we're gonna be benefit from it. I think, in the short term, there's been some pain, but moving forward, I think with COVID, we've reevaluated all of our process and realized that we can make more data-driven decisions, which will benefit patients for sure.
Excellent. Good to see that there are some benefits coming out of COVID-19. Ben, same question to you. Where do you see the patient experience in 5 years?
I have to echo Tom's comments. I think it's right spot on. I really hope that we are learning when the patient needs to come in and when the patient doesn't really need to come in. And that will allow us to basically provide a better patient experience, to optimize our operations within the cancer center. And that would really be a game changer. Basically, COVID-19 and the shutdown really forced us to accelerate the adoption of the technology that will allow that ultimately. And as Tom said, this accelerated adoption or forced adoption has not been always very easy, but I think Princess Margaret did a great job at this, and a big shout out to the Smart Cancer Care program led by Dr. Alejandro Berlin, who was basically put the virtual care system in place to really allow clinicians and patients to communicate as much as they needed to. I really hope too that after these difficult times, we will still using those technologies more and more. That we will introduce new technologies, as Tom said, to kind of allow patients to report more data back to the clinicians about their quality of life, about their symptoms, potential toxicities. These data, through digital means, could be captured and really help us build better predictive models and definitely improve cancer care in the long run. So all those new technologies, we basically see their value even more today than it was it was the case 6 months ago, and we should really capitalize on that. Even so, it's sometimes hard to change the whole system. We've been forced to, and I think it's for the best. So let's learn from these difficult times.
Outstanding. Listen, my final question for both of you, and you'll be happy to know it's a non-science question, and I know that we've got several questions from the audience, which we want to make sure that we have time for. Ben, I'll stick with you, and then go back to you, Tom. I'd really be interested to know what both of you have been doing over the last sort of 90 to 100 days to stay healthy and mitigate the stress during the pandemic. Have you changed your routine at all? Any fun new hobbies that you've developed?
I wish I could say I've changed all my habits to stay healthy or be healthier than before. Before I was commuting, I was doing 16 kilometers of bike every day to get to work, and that was what's keeping me in shape. I don't do that anymore, so I'm not in a better shape than before, unfortunately. So that's something I need to change. However, I have something called kids that really keeps me active all day long now. They're not at school. They keep me busy. They always have something to say or to do. So that keeps both my brain and my body very active. So I'm thankful for my kids to keep me in shape, even indirectly. But it's hard to change old habits. And I think we have to nowadays. So keep in shape, do more exercise in a safe way. That's gonna be very important in the future.
Fantastic. And hopefully at some point you'll be able to get out of your basement. Tom, how about you?
Yeah, I have two kids that are home, grade 7 and 8. So I've been doing a lot more grade 7 and 8 math than I'm used to, which has been okay. And I understand, I guess, most of it, as I found out. But as with a lot of people, like I'm baking a lot of bread, buying some appliances that can make us food that we don't normally make. So that's been good. My kids have been really good about wanting to work out. And so, we're doing YouTube videos in the basement. So I think at the end of the day, I'm going to probably come out of this a little stronger and well-fed anyway.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, thanks so much to both of you for sharing your work and time with us for this fascinating discussion. We're now going to open the floor for questions that we've received from our audience via Slido. So let's take a look and see what we have. I'll open it up to both of you. Maybe Tom, you might want to jump on this one first. How do you ensure the algorithms used for AI aren't inherently biased? I know that I asked a similar question, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So again, a bias has a very interesting implication, especially with AI. And so, in healthcare, when we talk about bias, we're talking about where we have clinical practice that is maybe inconsistent with what we ultimately want to achieve. And so I'm guessing that's the point of the question. I'll focus on healthcare. And so ultimately, what we need to do is we need to build algorithms, and as we've done here at Princess Margaret, deploy these and have clinicians actually look at them. And what we've been trying to do is actually show clinicians different options. So maybe even a human-generated treatment, for example, versus one that's automatically generated. And so, again, when we want to put these things into the clinic, it's essential that we do our due diligence and make sure that we're not missing anything. Now, the one nice thing is that often with AI systems, when things go like wrong, they go awfully wrong, and they make mistakes that humans don't typically make. And so, in those cases, that's not necessarily bias, but it does provide us with a way, or it gives us some good reason to understand, or have a way to understand how these systems are operating. And so that's just a normal part of the process, especially when we do something clinically.
Absolutely. Ben, let me ask you this question. Who owns healthcare data used as part of the data science program? And is there a governance structure in place to protect that information?
That's a key question. So in terms of data governance, so I know that UHN is working on a global governance structure to regulate access to the data. So that's coming. We rely on REB to access the data. So who owns the data? So that's really an important question. So ultimately, the data belongs to the patient. The institution has also a stake in the data, because we are scientists and clinicians within the institution will use either institutional funds, could be from the foundation, or external funding to run very expensive assays on those biospecimens, let's say. I consider data originating from the tumor biospecimen as healthcare data that also belongs to the patient. So we need to do a better job at sharing those data back with the patients. We need to do a better job at sharing those data broadly within the institution. Again, always according to ethical and privacy policies within the institution. That's what the data governance is going to dictate. How do we access the data? Who can access the data and do what? And what can we do with the data? So the data science program doesn't own any of those data. That really belongs to the patient and the institutions. And we are going to put rules in place, hopefully with systems that are a bit more automated. Right now, the process is quite tedious. You have to write a project, get it reviewed, ethically reviewed, get the approval, then finally contact the people who generated the data to access the database. So that process needs to be streamlined, and that's what we are working on.
Well, that's a great overview. Tom, let me ask this next question that we got in. The question was, when people talk about automation and AI, there's often a concern about job loss due to, I think I just lost the question. Okay, I think what the question was, since it just got deleted, was, is there a threat to, with the introduction of AI and automation, is this going to inevitably lead to job losses in the healthcare sector?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And when I often give talks about AI, I do include a portion of this. So I think the quick answer there is that we're not anticipating anyone losing their jobs over AI right now, and we're at the infancy of its use, and so we do need people to still collect data. We still need people to administer imaging tests and treat patients, but at the same time, we also need people to curate the data, and we also need people to have oversight over how these systems work. And so I'll keep it brief and say that I don't think we're at a point where AI will have any impact on jobs. But when we actually get into a place where we're using AI more and it's more automated, I think people's jobs will change. And this is sort of just a natural thing that any profession or many professions have gone through. And I think that's what we'll face at some point. But right now, I think we're not there yet.
Right. Ben, back to you, and I think you sort of touched on some of the challenges with the collection of data, but we've got a question here from Ahmed, and he's asking, are there any hindrances, politically, legal, economic, or otherwise, that make it difficult to access or collect the data you need to build your algorithms? Maybe there's more that you want to expand on that based on what you just said.
Yeah, I do. It's an excellent comment. I think it's usually overlooked how much time, resources, both manpower and money, are required to properly store and share data. And so that's basically for the economic aspect of it. When we write project, we need to be better. We need to request resources for data coordination, data cleaning, data sharing. So, but that's kind of the easy one to fix in a way. Let's collect more money. Let's ask more money for this. Let's hire the right person and let's do it. Now, from a political and legal perspective, I think that's where things are a bit more complicated. And I won't go into all the problems that we're facing when accessing data. Let's just say that it's a very tedious process. If it's internal, you have to write a project and get it ethically approved. If you're external to the institution, usually you have to basically ask a data access committee describing your project and say, well, can I access the data? And the rules are a bit fuzzy whether the data access committee can refuse or reject the request because they don't feel like the project is scientifically sound, or whether it's a project that could be competitive with somebody else internal who's doing something similar. So again, those rules are not extremely clear, which makes basically data sharing a very difficult thing to do. Even so, we understand that it's a crucial data sharing is crucial to do a large scale and better science. So I won't comment on the political and legal aspects of it because I'm not an expert, but there is definitely a lot of questions related to ethics, related to privacy that needs to be taken into account. But also, we are very bad at assessing the risk of not sharing. So when you share data and you assume there might be a leak, then suddenly you can easily say, well, that's going to be bad in this way. If you don't share data, it will also be a risk because science won't move as fast as possible, that less people will analyze those data, less discoveries will be made, but how can you really assess that? So I think we have to turn the question upside down a little bit and not only think about the risk of potential information leak, but also the risk of not sharing. And that is intrinsically difficult, but hopefully the mindset will change and we'll be able to design better policies for data sharing, both internally and externally.
Terrific. Thanks, Ben. By the way, I think the questions we're getting from the audience are outstanding, and I love this next one. Tom, I want to ask, we get a question from the audience that asked to talk a bit more about AI working in conjunction with people. If AI makes a wrong decision, for example, how do people intervene? And then they go on to say, I'm guessing that AI decisions happen in conjunction with human decision-making, but would appreciate hearing a bit more about how humans oversee the process. Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I could talk a little bit about our experience in radiation oncology with our treatment planning AI initiative. And so, in this case, we're still relying on humans to make a plan like we normally would, and then we have an AI system also building a plan. And so we're presenting clinicians with two choices, and they can choose. So if the AI system in these cases, it goes completely off the rails, they have a backup. They could even ask for a different human plan, for example, if they want. Another way around this is also because with AI, we can make treatments so quickly, we could make a whole suite of treatments and give all these options to the clinician. So maybe we could make 10 plans or 10 treatments that they could pick from with different priorities. And this would be something that would be impossible to do with a human, but at the same time, the clinician would have oversight. And in radiation, we're very lucky because we have this very extensive quality assurance program where there's someone like me, a medical physicist, a radiation oncologist, and a radiation therapist all need to approve a treatment before it ever sees a patient. And in other areas of medicine or healthcare, this might not be the case. And Ben was talking about using radiomics, where we're using images to make a prediction of a patient outcome. And you can appreciate that if the system comes back and just gives you a number, that's not very satisfying, especially when there's maybe no justification for how it got there. So another big area in AI is explainable AI. So it provides the end user, like a clinician, with the reasons that the AI made that decision. And I think that's really important. And so this is an active area of research, and we're working on it as well. But I think, for these systems to be deployed clinically, we're going to need we're going to need to provide the clinicians with the reasons why AI systems are making the decisions they are.
Terrific. And Tom, let me stick with you for the final question from the audience. And I think this is a timely one, especially given that the province yesterday updated its education curriculum to put more emphasis on mathematics, but also coding and investment or financial investment knowledge and data. The question here is, what does AI mean for the future skill requirements of health professionals? Will we see new kinds of specialists? Will clinicians require data science backgrounds moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I have been asked in the past, should I be competent or do I need to be competent in coding? Like, do I need to learn how to code? And I think, I'm not saying that you need to be a great coder. Like, you don't need to be like a superstar like Chris McIntosh, who can develop state-of-the-art algorithms himself. But at the same time, I think what we will need is we're going to have an appreciation for what the process is and how they're developed and where can things go wrong. But absolutely, clinicians will need to start asking different questions about the system and the results that they're giving. Hopefully, people in concert with clinicians will be able to build systems that make them the results that we get from AI more explainable, as I said. And so, I mean, I think a lot of the success that we have had with our AI project here at Princess Margaret is the fact that we have a computer scientist, radiation oncologist, or radiation oncologist, medical physicists, all working together. And so I think that's what we need. We need the expertise across a number of different areas in order to make it work. And at the same time, I think there will be more of a push, as you said yesterday, with the Ontario government in particular, making coding a priority. It does show that we do need to know the nuances of the process, which we probably, or a lot of people, don't know right now.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Tom. And I know we're up against the hour, and obviously that we've run out of time for any more questions. I want to thank everyone who submitted a question or upvoted questions for this session. I think they were outstanding. And thank you, Ben and Tom, for telling us about the work you are involved in and the passion that drives you every day. Clearly, big data and AI seem to be here for the long haul. So it's great to hear more about what that means in the context of cancer research and care. I certainly learned a lot from both of you today. For our next session, which is coming up, we will be discussing current trends in research at the Princess Margaret, including some of the ways that our researchers are pivoting to contribute to the global fight against COVID-19. The session will feature our director of the Princess Margaret Research Program, Dr. Aaron Schimmer, along with two outstanding clinician scientists, Dr. Stephen Chan, as well as Dr. Stephanie LaRue. We certainly hope that you'll be able to join us for our next session. You can register for that session, as well as our final session of the series on supportive care on our website at thepmcf.ca/webinars. There's also a donate button below on our Slido page. If you felt inspired by what you heard today, please consider making a contribution. I hope you all enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one on Thursday, July 9th. Until then, stay safe, be well, and take care of one another.
Thanks, Michael.